It's so easy nowadays in our world of noise and confusion to close ourselves off to one another, heck, to close ourselves off to ourselves, and to leave little room for the unexpected and for the good. Today, 3 steps for how you can find grace in your public life. Hi, I'm Rich Harwood. It's another episode of Harwood Half Hour, live from our studios in downtown Bethesda, Maryland. Shoot me a message to make sure to let me know that I can hear you, you can hear me, and you can tell me where you're dialing in from today. And the question I'd love for you to think about as we go through today's episode on grace is, where have you found grace in your life? Where have you found grace in your life? And where have you found grace in your public life? Where have you found grace in your public life? You know, this is a topic I did over a decade ago, back in 2008, at our Harwood Innovators Summit, which we hold every year for innovators from across the country and now actually around the world. And I remember raising this topic of grace at that summit, and people in the room looked at me and they said, "Are you kidding? We're actually at one of your summits, we're actually going to talk about the topic of grace. Where did that come from?" And so I kept the conversation going, and I asked them, where have you found grace in your life, and where have you found grace in your public life? And you know, once people got over the initial sense of shock, even that we were going to talk about this topic, it was remarkable what they began to say about the ways in which they've experienced grace in their lives, the times at which in their lives someone did something for them, something unexpected happened to them, the ways in which they had been touched by someone else. And as they told these stories over the first evening of our summit, this is the type of conversation we have every first night at our summit, it was remarkable about how personal these stories became, how touching they were, how moving they were, how emotional people became, how, you know, as I think back on it even now, as we're doing this Harwood Half Hour episode, how their physical demeanor shifted in the conversation as they talked about the moments in their lives when they were touched by grace, by someone else, and this sense of grace in their lives. You know, when I think about the definition of grace, I think about it being that we're in, and as you know, there are lots of different definitions of grace, but the one I think about is that we are open to the unexpected, we are open to the inexplicable, to the unseen, as I said, to the unexpected, that we allow something to come over us, to touch us, and that we ourselves exude towards others a sense of goodwill and decency, and that we ourselves might do something unexpected or inexplicable or maybe unseen to others that make their lives better, that bring some sense of meaning to someone else's life, to touch them in some unexpected, inexplicable, or unseen way. And so, you know, when I was thinking about today, I was thinking about different stories of grace that I've heard in my life, that I've written about at different times over the last few decades. And one that came to me actually almost immediately was, and you've probably heard a story like this, or maybe seen a story like this, is the story of the runner in a track and field event, like at the Olympics or some other track and field event, where they're running around the track, or they're doing a cross-country race or something, and one of the runners trips and falls. And then, lo and behold, out of seemingly nowhere, another runner who is running by them in that moment when that first runner trips and falls, the second runner notices that runner tripped and fell, and the one who's passing them by actually stops. And not only stops, looks at the runner who's now on the ground, goes over to the runner, picks them up, and helps them over the finish line. I've actually seen this where someone has stopped, picked the other runner up. Sometimes the other runner is cramping. Sometimes they've just tripped and fell and scraped their knee. But where they actually put their arm around their own shoulder and help carry them over the finish line. It's a remarkable thing to see. If you're interested in seeing this, just Google runners who tripped and fell. And you'll see all these come up. And in fact, a colleague in my office told me just the other day that when she needs a lift, she actually Googles that and finds one of these videos and watches it. And it might give you a lift also too when you see it. And you might also be wondering, why in God's name is Rich even raising the notion of grace in this Harwood half-hour episode? Now, I know he did it over 10 years ago at the summit. I know he just talked to his colleague about it the other day. He seems to be watching these videos when he Googles them. But here's why I'm raising the issue of grace today, and why I actually think, all kidding aside, it's so important for us to be thinking about today. So much of our public lives have become acrimonious. So much of them have become where we have heated debates. So many of us have sort of divvied ourselves up into sort of tribes and groups that we associate with. So many of us identify with just one political party or the other. And there's all sorts of research on this, and I've written about it, that when we hear someone from another political party speak, we don't listen to them. We put our hands over our ears in a way. We put our hands over our eyes. We don't want to hear what they have to say. We don't want to see them. We literally close ourselves off from one another. So many of us in our public lives, when things go wrong or when things go bad, we not only figuratively, we literally turn our backs on one another so that we can't see and hear one another. So something can't happen to us. But when something can't happen to us, it means when something bad can't happen to us, it also means that we are closing ourselves off from something good happening, from something positive, from something unexpected or inexplicable or unseen from happening to us. And it seems to me that we have, in a sense, in our hunkering down in our public lives, and I don't just mean in our national public lives, but I mean in our community lives, in our everyday lives, even in your life at work or in your families, that we hunker down and close ourselves off to one another. We close ourselves off when we're watching the news. We close ourselves off when we're in a discussion with someone else. We close ourselves off when we're on the phone with one another. We close ourselves off when we're at dinner with one another. When we hear things that we don't like, or we anticipate things that we don't like, or something happens that we don't like, we close ourselves off from one another. And grace in these moments, grace in these times, can seem like the farthest thing from us. It can be the farthest thing from our minds. It can be out of sight and out of mind, as we often say. And it's why I wanted to talk to you about it today, because I happen to think that one of the things that we need to bring back into our public lives, yes, we need to measure change. Yes, we need to think about impact. Yes, we need to think about how relevant and significant our actions are in the lives of our communities. But I think another thing that we need to think about is, how do we make room for grace in our public lives? How do we make room for grace in our public lives? So with that in mind, there are three things that I want to talk about how you can find room in your public life, in your community life, in your life with others for grace. Three things. Here's the first one. We have to leave room. You need to leave room. I urge you, I plead with you to leave room for the unexpected, for the inexplicable, and for the unseen to happen. And what does this mean? What does this mean for you? It means that you have to have an open posture, that we can't be so hunkered down, that we can't be sort of, in a sense, cowering in the corner, worried about something bad happening to us, someone doing something bad to us, someone saying something that we don't like and that we don't want to hear, that we need to maintain a posture of being open, receptive to things. That it requires, in order for us to leave room for the unexpected, the inexplicable, the unseen to happen, that it actually requires that we're attuned to one another, that in a sense we're tuned in, we're listening, we're engaged with, because unless we're attuned to one another, we won't be receptive. We won't see or experience the unexpected or inexplicable or the unseen from happening. And that we need to ensure that we don't push others away right when they may be coming toward us. And here, just think about the runners that I was talking about. When I was watching one of the videos, you could actually see the runner on the ground as the other runner stopped with a look on their face saying, "Are you kidding me? You're actually going to stop? You're actually going to notice that I fell down? You're actually going to come over to me?" And when that person came over to them in the heat of a race for a medal, like it's something like at the Olympics or something like the Olympics, just imagine someone coming over to you when you're in a race like that. What do? Are you attuned to them? Are you open to them? Are you leaving room for the unexpected, the inexplicable, the unheard of, or the unseen as someone comes towards you? If we're going to allow grace to touch our lives, to be part of our lives, then the first thing we need to do is to be open, to leave room for the unexpected, the inexplicable, the unseen. The second thing, here's the second thing, if that's the first thing. The second is that we need to allow things to come over us, to literally touch us, And so here I wonder, when something happens to you, do you allow it to touch you? Do you feel it? You know, when I'm talking to people sometimes and I say something, oftentimes when I'm giving them praise about something and they're resistant, I know they're resistant to hearing praise, that they're suspect of praise, that it seems unexpected, it can seem inexplicable to them, it can be unheard of to them. I often say to them, after I've praised them, I say, "Did you hear what I just said? Do you feel what I just said? Have you left room to feel what I just said?" Feeling grace, experiencing grace, is an experience. It's not simply a notion, an abstract idea. It is not simply something that we talk about or simply something that we recognize. It's actually more than that. It's something that you actually experience, that you feel, that touches you. And so, again, when I think about the runners, I think about one of these videos that I saw where when the runner who fell down and the other runner came over to her, the runner who had fallen down, when the other runner touched her, she actually recoiled. She pulled back. You can actually see her in the video pulling back from the other runner, as if saying, "Please don't touch me. Please don't touch me." And then in the moment when the one who had fallen down realized that the inexplicable was happening, the unexpected was happening, all of a sudden you could see her literally physically lean into the other runner who stopped and put her arm around her, who began to help her up. And as they walked towards the finish line together, you could see them leaning into one another and physically touching one another. And so my question for you is, when the inexplicable happens, when the unexplainable happens, when the unheard of happens, when the unseen occurs, Do you allow it to touch you? Do you allow yourself to experience it? Because I think that's part of grace. It's the power of grace. It's what gives it so much currency and a sense that something real in your life is happening, something positive is happening. So if the first part of grace, of making room in your life for grace, in your public life, is to be open to the unexpected, the inexplicable, the unseen. And the second is to allow grace to come over you and to touch you. Then the third part of grace in your life, in your public life, is this. Do you exercise goodwill and decency towards others? You know, it's wonderful when grace happens to us. It's wonderful when it happens to you. The experience, I think when you think about it, I know when I think about it, the experience is so, as I was just mentioning before, so positive. It can be overwhelming in the moment. It can be even more powerful when you think back on it and have a chance to reflect on it. But here's the thing. Do you make room to exercise grace towards others in your life, in our public lives? How open are you to exercise grace with others? How open are you to exercise grace when something doesn't feel right, when someone says something to you and like the runner on the ground, you might pull back, but now you have the opportunity to actually lean in yourself. Do you extend grace to others? Do you extend a sense of goodwill to others? Do you extend your hand to others? When you might be in an argument or a discussion and it becomes heated and emotional, and someone says something that makes you recoil, or that may be hurtful, or makes you feel uncomfortable, it's either a moment for us to turn away from that individual, it's a moment for us to turn our backs on that individual, or it's a moment for us to turn toward them, to lean into them, to extend our hand to them, to extend a sense of goodwill toward them, to extend a sense of decency toward them, to do it even when, or maybe especially when, we don't believe it was extended towards us, or maybe when the other person is hurting, or when they're emotional about something. In those moments, when we might be thinking, why in God's name isn't someone extending grace towards us? Maybe it's a time for you, for me, for all of us, to not think about ourselves, but to actually think about the other person, and to think, how can we extend and exercise grace in their lives, to exercise grace in a way that is unexpected for them, to exercise grace in a way that is inexplicable for them, to exercise grace in a way that maybe was or seems unheard of for them, or might even be unseen for them. Can you do it? Will you do it? Will you do it when it's most uncomfortable, when it's most emotional, when it's not the easiest of times to do it, but maybe for you, the hardest of times to do it? You see, if we want to improve our public lives, if we want to strengthen our public lives, if we want to get on a different trajectory of a more hopeful, more inclusive society, then I believe, and I suspect you believe, that we need more grace. We need to exercise more grace. And we can't just hope that grace comes towards us. We need to exercise grace towards one another. And so look, here's the thing. None of us are angels. We're all imperfect. We all have foibles. We all have weaknesses. God knows I have quite a few of them. And I'm not suggesting, in trying to exercise grace, that we should seek perfection in our lives, that somehow we should become angels. None of us are angels and none of us are perfect. And so when you think about grace, when you think about the three things I said about grace, that to leave room for grace, we need to leave room for the unexpected, the inexplicable, the unseen to happen. That in order for grace to occur, we need to allow it to come over us and touch us and for us to experience it. And that for grace to occur, we ourselves need to extend decency and goodwill towards others. If those three things are important to you, then let me leave you with this hope for you today. My hope is this: because we are not angels, because we are imperfect, there's even more room and more reason and more purpose to exercise grace today. That we need to exercise it. We need to be open to it. We need to extend it to others. That you need to be open to it and extend it to others. And so my hope is that each of us, that those of you who are listening, can find grace in your public life, and that you can extend it to others in your life, because we need it now more than ever before. And so thanks for joining me today. As you know, it's our 30th anniversary that we're celebrating this year. Our work is rooted in a philosophy of civic faith. It's rooted in the practice of turning outward. In the last 30 years, our work has spread to all 50 US states and to 40 countries. And on this 30th anniversary, we've rededicated ourselves to finding ways to support you in your efforts to create a more hopeful, inclusive society. And so I thank you for joining us. I urge you to go to our website, theharwoodinstitute.org. And in the meantime, find ways to exercise grace in your life, and join me again in 2 weeks on Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, be well.